Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
For the Booze.
For the Booze.
Back again.
For our second episode of Halloween month.
Ooh.
Spooky time.
Spooky season is upon us, and we have just left the Hellfire Caves of England over
Yes.
So, this week, no listener stories. It is what it is.
Boo.
But we are going to be going over to, well, you know what? What you got? Anything new?
Me?
Yep.
I have a wedding this weekend.
Who are you getting married to?
Oh, definitely not me. I'm bringing you, my plus one.
Oh,
A friend of
so
mine's getting
honored.
married, and I don't know. I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time.
It is.
With that
What
being,
about you?
Me? Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. Building guitars. It's my side gig.
Love it.
Well, we have left the Hellfire Caves and talked about the Hellfire Club. And this week, we are going to not really continue the story, but this has some links to one another.
Adjacent.
We're going to be headed over to Ireland.
Yeah.
Once again, very haunted Ireland. And we are going to
Loftus Hall.
That's right, Loftus Hall. Now, this place is very old. Very old. And it has some very good stories surrounding it. The history goes way back. This house just celebrated its 666th anniversary a few years ago.
Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Wow.
And you'll see that the number 666 comes up quite a few times in this. So it's very interesting. So without further ado, I think, we got nothing else. We'll just jump right into it this week.
Let's do it.
This week's episode is brought to us by the great and powerful Wikipedia.com, IrelandXO.com, and RedmondFamily.com. Loftus Hall has a long history of ownership through private residents, landlords, 2 different orders of nuns, and a hotel in the 1980s run by Kay and Michael Devereaux. Purchased by Shane and Aidan Quigley in 2011, Loftus Hall was open to the public in 2012 with guided tours of the house and a fully restored walled gardens. It was later closed in 2020 and then sold in 2021. It is currently under renovation and unfortunately is not open to the public. But today's story starts much farther back in time, with a dark and malevolent history that would surely concrete its legacy throughout time. Hookhead, historically called Rindowin, is a headland in County Wexford, Ireland, on the east side of the estuary of the Three Sisters rivers, the Norey, Suir, and Barrow. It is part of the Hook Peninsula and is adjacent to the historic town for which Loftus Hall can be found. It is situated on the R734 road 31 miles from Wexford town. In Irish, its name was originally Rin Dubhain, Dubhain's Point, named for a 5th century Brittonic saint of the name. Literally, it means little black-haired one. The English name is possibly a calque of his name, incorrectly read as being Dubin, fishing hook. This area is the location of Hook Lighthouse, the oldest working lighthouse in the world. Access to the lighthouse is by guided tours only, which are available all year round. At the foot of the lighthouse, there's a cafe, gift shop, and a maritime exhibition. The lighthouse is a destination on the Ireland Ancient East tourist route. The Ireland Ancient East is a destination marketing brand representing the East Coast and parts of the Midlands and South Coast of Ireland. Unlike the Wild Atlantic Way, the region's tourism trail doesn't have a set driving route and instead seeks to connect various sites throughout 17 counties and 2 provinces. The concept is built around 4 pillars: Ancient Today, we are talking to you about Loftus Hall, a large country house on the Hook Peninsula, County Wexford, Ireland. Built on the site of the original Redmond Hall, it is said to have been haunted by the devil and the ghost of a woman. The story starts back in 1170, the second wave of Anglo-Normans, led by Raymond le Gros, landed about the 1st of May 1170 at Bagenbun, south of Fethard-on-Sea, on the Hook Head Peninsula in Wexford. Le Gros, who had 10 men-at-arms and 70 archers, was joined by Hervey de Montmorency with a few more, and established a defended camp at Bagenbun, constructed of banks and ditches with a palisade. Le Gros and his men were attacked at Bagenbun by a combined force of 3,000 Norsemen, drawn from the city of Waterford and their Irish allies. Although outnumbered, the Normans managed to drive off the attackers and take prisoners. This battle was to be known as, quote, the battle where Ireland was lost and won. Le Gros remained at Bagenbun until Strongbow, Richard Fitz Gilbert de Clare, landed near Waterford on the 23rd of August with an army of 1,200, and their combined forces took the city of Waterford on the 25th of August. Raymond was granted these very lands of the Hook Peninsula as a reward for his bravery, and it was here that he built his first castle, where he set up his Irish legacy, coined and adopted the name Redmond, where his family would remain until unseated by Cromwell after the staunch defense of the, quote, Hall by his greatest great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson, Alexander Redmond, in 1649. As Cromwell stated, he would firstly take Redmond Hall and then Waterford City, quote, by hook or by crook, which refers to the two prominent headlands on either side of the estuary to the harbors of Waterford and New Ross. The Redmond family built the original Redmond Hall in about 1350, during the time of the Black Death. It replaced their original castle at Houseland near Portersgate. For about 300 years, between the 1350s and 1652, the Redmond family home was Redmond Hall in Wexford. On the coat of arms, Redmond Hall is depicted by the castle with two towers up on the red shield of Redmond. In each of the three corners of the shield is a golden wool pack. These are sometimes described as cushions, which in early days were merely sacks stuffed with wool or straw. In 1642, the future Loftus Hall, the still known as Redmond Hall, was attacked by English soldiers loyal to Charles I of England. The Irish Confederate Wars had broken out in 1641, and hostilities commenced in Wexford in 1643. An English garrison of around 100 men under the command of Lord Esmond was based at Duncannon Fort on Waterford Harbor. On February 23rd, the garrison was reinforced by a further 200 soldiers under the command of Captain Anthony Weldon and Captain Thomas Aston, along with 6 cannons. On June 19th, a party of these soldiers from the fort were attacked by a group of Irish Confederates under the command of Captain Rossiter and Major James Butler at Shielbagan, while on their way to Tintern. The English were routed and driven back to the fort. Redmond Hall was clearly visible to the Bellegarde garrison at Duncannon. The hall's owner, Alexander Redmond, was known to be sympathetic to the rebels. The hall was known as a place that gave assistance to the rebels. Captain Aston believed it could be easily taken, and on the 20th of July, 1642, set sail from Duncannon with around 90 men and 2 small cannons, landing near the hall. Although he was 68 years old, Alexander Redmond barricaded the hall and prepared to defend it. He was assisted by his sons, Robert and Michael, some of their tenants, 2 men-at-arms, and a tailor who happened to be at work in the hall when the attack took place. The defenders numbered 10 in all and were armed with long-barreled fowling pieces. Captain Aston drew his men up in front of the hall and demanded admission in the name of the king. Alexander Redmond retorted that Aston was welcome to come in providing that he left his soldiers and weapons outside. A lengthy gun battle then ensued. Aston discovered that his cannons were too small to make much of an impression on the main door. To add to his troubles, about half his men abandoned him to pillage the countryside. As the fight dragged on, a thick sea mist descended on the peninsula. Meanwhile, the Irish Confederates under Captain Rossiter and Captain Thomas Roche were still encamped at Shilbagan. Hearing of the attack, they marched rapidly to the aid of the defenders and surprised the attackers under cover of the fog. About 30 of the English escaped to their boats and back to the fort. Captain Aston himself was one of those killed. Many of the others, including Lord Esmond's two nephews, Lieutenants John and Walter Esmond, were taken prisoner. Several of the English prisoners were hanged the following day on Thomas Roche's orders, probably at Ballyhack. On the 20th of August, 11 others were hanged at New Ross, including one of the Esmond brothers. The official Redmond family pedigree alleges that Alexander Redmond had to defend the hall one or even two more times against soldiers of Oliver Cromwell in the autumn of 1642 during the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland. There is a tradition that the defenders used sacks of wool to block up breaches in the walls created by enemy cannons. These wool sacks and representations of the hall can be seen in the coat of arms issued to one of their members in 1763. It is alleged that Alexander Redmond received favorable terms from Cromwell and died in the hall in 1650 or 1651, after which his surviving family were evicted, allowed only to retain a third of their original estates in County Wexford. The Loftus family were English planters who had owned land in the neighborhood from around 1590 when Sir Dudley Loftus was granted the lands around Kilclogan. Nicholas Loftus acquired the manor of Fethard-on-Sea in 1634, and Fethard Castle became the family residence. That was afterwards occupied by the Redmond family after they were evicted from the hall, which is now Loftus Hall. After the end of Cromwell's campaign, Nicholas Loftus was given extensive lands in the south of County Wexford and purchased the hall from, quote, several adventurers and soldiers. But it was only in 1666 when his son, Henry, moved to the hall from Dungulf that it became the principal residence of the Loftus family. To establish the new name of his property, he had the following inscription inscribed in stone on the entrance piers at Porter's Gate. Quote,
Henry Loftus of Loftus Hall, Esquire, 1680.
Nonetheless, the old name remained in use till the end of the century. In 1684, Henry Loftus carried out extensive repairs to the hall, which presumably needed repairing after the turbulent events of the previous decades. Charles Tottenham became lord of the manor, having to adopt the Loftus name to inherit lands and title as per instructions of Nicholas Loftus in 1752, by marrying the Honorable and Loftus, daughter of the first Viscount Loftus. They had 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls, Elizabeth and Anne. However, his wife became ill and died while the girls were still young. 2 years later, Tottenham married his cousin Jane Cliff, and they lived along with Anne in Loftus Hall. And one evening, in 1775, Charles was resting in his home with his second wife and daughter from his first marriage, Anne, while the Loftus family were away on business. During a storm, a ship unexpectedly arrived at the Hook Peninsula, where the mansion was located. A young man, a dark stranger, was welcomed into the mansion, as it was customary of the time to take in sailors at this time during a storm. Anne and the young man became very close. One night, the family and mysterious young man were in the game room playing cards. In the game, each player received 3 cards, apart from Anne, who was only dealt 2 by the mystery man. A butler serving the Tottenham family at the table was just about to question the man when Anne bent down to pick up another card from the floor, which she must have dropped. It is said that when Anne bent down to pick up the card, she looked beneath the table and saw that the mysterious man had a cloven foot. It was then that Anne stood up and said to the man, quote, "You have a cloven foot." It was then the man went up through the roof, leaving behind a large hole in the ceiling and burning the chair, table, wall, and ceiling, leaving behind burn marks that would prove nearly impossible to get rid of. Soon, Anne became mentally ill, and it is believed that the family was ashamed of Anne and locked her away in her favorite room, where she would be happy, yet out of everyone's view, which was known to be the tapestry room. She refused food and drink, and sat with her knees under her chin, looking out the tapestry room window and across the sea to where Dunmore East is today, waiting for her mysterious stranger to return, until she died in the tapestry room in 1775. It is said that when she died, they could not straighten her body, as her muscles had seized and she was buried in the same sitting position in which she had died at the age of 31, less than a year after the visitation. After Anne's death, it is said that the Tottenhams were plagued daily by innumerable disturbances, noises, and apparitions heard and felt in the tapestry chamber, leaving them and their servants in a perpetual state of fear. The Tottenhams summoned the local Catholic parish priest, one Father Broders, to Loftus Hall to perform an exorcism. It is said he used all the powers of his office to exorcise the demons out of the house, entirely focusing his ministrations on the tapestry chamber. The first account by a guest of supernatural encounter came near the end of 1790. A gentleman invited to Loftus Hall for the hunting party arrived late and was put up in the tapestry room because the rest of the house was full. Moments after he extinguished his candle and settled into bed, something heavy leapt onto the bed, growling like a wild dog. The curtains were torn back and the bedclothes were stripped entirely from beneath him. Thinking he was the victim of a vicious prank, he struck a light and searched the room, shocked to find nothing and no one within it. The lock on his door was fully engaged, as he had locked it before going to bed that evening. Years later, a one Mr. Shannon, the valet of Marquis of Ely, was put up in the tapestry room for the course of their stay in the house. On the very first night, the entire house was awakened by the roars and screams of Mr. Shannon. He had escaped the room and was found cowering in a most incriminating position, tearing at his nightshirt and wild with fear. Upon being settled, Shannon told his tale. Shortly after he extinguished his candle, the curtains rattled and were torn from the window, where a tall, ghostly lady, dressed in stiff, dirty silk, stood immediately by his bedside. Shannon was so terrified by the encounter that he insisted he would leave the employer of the Marquis should his lordship ever again expect him to occupy that room. Numerous others are said to have been terrorized in the tapestry chamber by the ghost of a tall woman dressed in silk, who would move through the room, stop before them, then enter the powder closet, including Mr. Dale, the, quote, sober-minded man of reason, who served as tutor of the young Marquis of Ely, as well as a, quote, decent clergyman named Reed, and a newspaper man who claimed to have seen the ghost of Anne Tottenham on at least 3 occasions while he stayed as a guest in the tapestry room. The Loftus family rose in the peerage over the following centuries. In 1800, the owner of the hall, the first Earl of Ely, previously Baron Loftus of Loftus Hall, was created by Marquis of Ely. It was his descendant, the 4th Marquis, who between 1872 and 1884 refurbished the old hall and used the existing structure, resulting in the present house that stands today. The Redmond family had disputed the claim of the Loftus family in court, but without success. In 1684, they were compensated with lands in the barony of Ballinkeen in the north of County Wexford. Some of their descendants joined the movement of the Wild Geese and served in a number of foreign armies, most notably that of France. Others were involved in banking and politics and became a prominent local political dynasty in the 19th and 20th centuries in support of the Irish party of Isaac Butt and Charles Stewart Parnell. The most famous of these was John Redmond, who led the party till his death in 1918. Between 1872 and 1884, the most honorable John Henry Wellington Graham Loftus, 4th Marquis of Ely, under the guidance of his mother, Lady Jane Hope Vere Loftus, lady-in-waiting to Queen Victoria, undertook an extensive rebuilding of the entire mansion, adding many of the famous elements such as the grand staircase, mosaic tiled floor, elaborate parquet flooring, and technical elements which had not been seen in houses in Ireland at the time, such as flushing toilets and blown air heating. A lot of Lord Ely's inspiration was taken from Osborne House, the Queen's summer residence on the Isle of Wight. The extensive works were believed to have been undertaken to facilitate a visit from the Queen, but this didn't happen, and the family never got to fully enjoy the house, with the 4th Marquis dying very young, without issue, and leaving the estate in a poor financial state to his cousin, who eventually elected to place it on the market, classed as a 3-story, non-basement mansion, 9 bays to the front with a balustraded parapet. In 1917, Loftus Hall was bought by the Sisters of Providence and turned into a convent and a school for young girls interested in joining the order. In 1983, it was purchased by Kay and Michael Devereaux, who opened it as, quote, Loftus Hall Hotel, which was subsequently closed in the late 1990s. In 2011, the house was purchased by the Quigley family. In more recent times, the hall had been run as a tourist attraction with guided tours of the property and seasonal events, with people traveling from all over the world to take part in paranormal investigations following the episodic Ghost Adventures with Zach Baggins, Aaron Goodwin, and Nick Groff. The gothic thriller The Lodgers was shot on location at Loftus Hall in 2016 and premiered to international acclaim at TIFF 2017. The hall was then later put on the market in 2020 during the pandemic. Later, 2021, an article from irishcentral.com, quote, Ireland's most haunted mansion sold. Who's the brave new owner? Unquote. It has 22 bedrooms, 97 windows, and the mantle of Ireland's most haunted house, and now Loftus Hall on the Hookhead Peninsula in Wexford has sold after a year on the market. Loftus Hall, which was previously featured in horror movies and ghost hunter TV shows, as well as literally being a tourist attraction as a, quote, haunted house, has sold after a year on the market. The vast mansion located at Fethard-on-Sea in County Wexford has been famed for generations for its ghostly sightings, including testimonies that the devil was once hosted at the house. The 22-bedroom grand house sits on 63 acres of land, with access to a private beach. And this is where the story ends. A house built in the 1350s, known as Ireland's most haunted location, and possibly the most haunted location in the world, having been visited by the devil himself. We wanted to do this location after doing the Hellfire Caves. He may have been the president of the club, but this is where the devil lives. But, as we always say, it's up to you, the listener. What do you believe? Did the devil really come here to play a game of cards with a beautiful young woman? Did Anne really go crazy after witnessing something so sinister? And do they both really still roam the halls? I guess for now, we really will never know, unless the new owners decide to open the doors once again.
Dang. That was a lot of history.
Well, over the years, there were actually 2 orders of nuns. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on them, and one of them was completely private, and nobody was even allowed to go in there and see it while they were there.
Oh, wow.
It was completely shut down, which I actually found out from watching the Irish Ghost Hunters. The guy Aidan Quigley, one of the 2 brothers that owned the place, actually told this story of how the first order of nuns, they basically moved in, shut the gates, and nobody was ever allowed to come in.
Wow.
And
That's
then
crazy.
after that, the second order moved in, and they made it more of an open house. They even held mass there on Sundays.
Okay.
And it became a little more relaxed until later on it was sold to the Devereaux.
Wow. That is super interesting.
But there is a lot of history, a lot of claims that have happened here. There have been paranormal experiences here for hundreds of years, which is odd because I'm going to give it away now that at the end of the show, I have no EVPs to play.
Yeah.
I mean, if I wanted to sift through episodes of, say, like Ghost Adventures or Destination Fear or Overnight, I'm sure I could find some.
Right.
But I don't want to play their episodes.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to clip them down, I'll play them in an episode of this. It's just strange to me that there aren't really any clips out there. I don't know. But there are tons and tons of accounts of paranormal activity here. And they truly they believe that the devil still visits this house to this day.
Maybe the devil made it his home.
Yeah.
They
that's
let
what
him
I'm
in.
saying.
They played a game with him. I mean,
I left out a key component to the devil story that isn't going to be, it's in yours. And there's a good reason of why I believe he may come back to visit the house.
ooh.
So I think we should let you tell the story, and we should hear why the devil comes back.
Let's do it.
And now, time for an ad break.
And now, back to our show. This week's ghostly stories are brought to you by mentalfloss.com, darkemeraldtales.wordpress.com, metro.co.uk, thelineup.com, Irish Ghost Hunters YouTube, and allthatisinteresting.com. Loftus Hall's dark and haunted history dates back to the 18th century. The original Wexford building was home to a man named Charles Tottenham, who, according to legend, opened his house to a stranger one night during a storm. The Tottenham family sat down to enjoy playing a simple card game with their visiting guest. But when one of the players bent down to pick up a card that had fluttered to the floor, she noticed the bottom half of a stranger, and that stranger had a cloven foot. Shocked and obviously surprised, she stood straight up out of her seat, and the demonic visitor disappeared through the ceiling in a cloud of fire and smoke. The original structure was demolished in 1870 to make way for the current mansion, but its spooky reputation lives on for generations. The current owners, Shane and Aidan Quigley, bought the home in 2011 and started renovations, quickly followed by inviting the public in for ghost tours. Looming over the windswept coasts of the Hook Peninsula near Wexford, Ireland, Loftus Hall certainly strikes the right look of a haunted abode. While the current Loftus Hall dates back only as far as the 1870s, the first building was erected on this spot in 1170. Some locals say the history of the place dates back even farther, to when it served as a sacred site to Ireland's early Celtic inhabitants. Certainly, the land upon which Loftus Hall stands has seen its fair share of history. Add into the mix the reports of a troubled spirit that haunts its rooms, a dark legend of an infernal visitor from hell, and one viral ghost photo from 2014 that sent chills down the spines of people everywhere. And Loftus Hall just may be Ireland's most haunted house. While the devil's visit to the hall may have ceased with Anne's death, or with Father Broder's exorcism, the house has retained its haunted reputation across the decades. It has served as the subject of documentaries and abortive feature film projects, and was the filming location for the 2017 ghost horror movie, The Lodgers. Loftus Hall appeared in episodes of paranormal investigation shows, Irish Ghost Hunters, and Ghost Adventures, but what led them all there was the infamous eerie ghost photo that went viral in 2014. The photo, taken by Thomas Beavis of England, shows what looks like a specter watching his tour group through one of the many windows of Loftus Hall. Beavis told the New Ross Standard, quote,
"We were all feeling a little edgy from that, but when I showed the photo to my friends, we freaked. The girl could be the spirit of Anne Tottenham, still walking around Loftus Hall. It could be some strange occurrence because of a supernatural power, but I don't know."
End quote. An article from metro.co.uk reads as follows. Thomas Beavis, 21, from Lewisham, made the spine-tingling discovery as he flicked through his camera on the drive home from Loftus Hall in Wexford. He took the snaps from his mother on a tour with his friends, but captured what could be the spirit of the little Anne totem and the spooky face of an old lady in a window next to the front door. Quote,
"I only really looked at the photo while we were driving home. I was actually stunned. We were all feeling a little edgy from that, but when I showed the photo to my friends, we freaked. I zoomed in all over the windows to find this girl in the window. I had taken some time before I showed it to everyone, just because I didn't really understand what I was looking at."
End quote. Stories suggest that the Totem family moved into the mansion around 1766, but the youngest, Anne, fell ill after an encounter with a demonic spirit. She was shunned by her family and locked away in a room in the huge estate until she died. At first glance, the holidaymaker thought it was someone's reflection, but on closer inspection, he noticed that the suspected ghost is looking the opposite way to those outside of the house. Mr. Beavis added, quote,
"Normally, I am a guy that believes in what he sees, but with this, I still don't understand what's going on in this photo."
End quote. It was once believed that the presence of the Dark Lord lingered, and poltergeist activity became rife within the house, escalating to such a point that the Protestant clergy were powerless to do anything about it. In desperation, the Loftus family called upon Father Thomas Borders, a Catholic priest residing on the townland, also known as Loftus Hall. He performed an exorcism and appeared to banish the demons within. Borders rose to the position of parish priest and remained as canon until his death in 1773. He is buried in the old Whoretown Cemetery, and his gravestone reads, quote,
"Here lies the body of Thomas Broders, who did good and prayed for all, and banished the devil from Loftus Hall."
End quote. For his good work, the priest had failed to drive the supernatural from the mansion. The spectral lady, believed to be the tormented Anne, has been seen many times over the years in the area of the tapestry room and walking down the grand staircase. Disembodied children's voices, phantom cries, and the sound of ghostly horses have fallen on terrified ears. Sudden temperature drops, feelings of foreboding, and flickering lights have all been witnessed. The paranormal group, Irish Ghost Hunters, was founded 8 years ago by Tim Kelly, and they have steadily built upon a reputation as a professional, scientific paranormal researching group for solid evidence among the tales of ghosts, poltergeists, and other unexplained phenomena. The team, made up of 8 ghost enthusiasts, is headed by Tim and lead investigator and local manager, Tina Barco. They regularly attend Ireland's supernatural hotspots, yet Loftus Hall is so terrifying. Seasoned IGH member Tina rates it as a 10 on the most haunted scale. On a recent lockdown with the public, Tina from IGH said that while everyone held their ground and lasted the entire investigation, the night was far from uneventful. She stated, quote, "Our first Loftus lockdown had many personal experiences. Members of the public were being pushed and pulled, others overwhelmed with feelings of nausea. There were growls, children's voices, and numerous unexplained shadows. It was an amazing night. Each time we return, activity peaks a bit more, as if the house knows us now. We as a team are passionate about Loftus, and we love to share our findings with the public while we stand back and let them experience it firsthand. Our team is scientific, which means we use tried and tested paranormal scientific equipment and gather evidence. While we are open-minded towards them, we do not use mediums and rely on our equipment to provide proof in addition to personal accounts." End quote. These continued visits to Loftus Hall are to solidify the consensus that the place is undoubtedly haunted, and IGH are continuing to collect evidence on such a high-profile location to maintain the validity of claims, as well as give members of the general public an opportunity they would not ordinarily get to experience. If the account of the devil reminds you of another tale you may have heard, it should. An identical story was told of a card game being held at the notorious Hellfire Club in Dublin on Montpelier Hill, where a stranger with cloven hooves for feet sat at the table. As well as the Hellfire Club, Montpelier Hill was the site of a hunting lodge known as Dolly Mount. This lodge was owned by none other than Henry Loftus. So the question must be asked, with Henry Loftus taking residence in 1666, and the second accounted visit by a cloven-hooved stranger was to the Hellfire Club on the very land in Dublin previously owned by the Loftus family. Was Anne Tottenham the unfortunate victim of the wrong place at the wrong time? What is the meaning of Loftus' association with signs of the devil? And was a pact made with Lucifer himself for the Redmond estate? 4 years ago, we find Irish ghost hunters' video, where they travel to Loftus Hall for an investigation. As the video begins, we see the team driving up a long road, commenting on how truly isolated and in the middle of nowhere it really is. Arriving at the mansion, they meet with Aidan Quigley. At the time, he was one of the two owners of the house. With introductions out of the way, the group goes on to get the story from Aidan, who says, quote,
"I was aware of its past because I grew up here locally, and from a very young age, I was aware that the hall, when it was a convent, when the nuns were there, it was a very private place, and nobody knew much about it. And when it was opened as a hotel, people got in around the house, but there was still a lot of unexplainable fear from my parents' and grandparents' generation. It wasn't really a place to go. It was a place to stay away from, and still is today. We can't explain things that have been said to happen to us here. Things that have been said to the staff. Things that I myself wouldn't have believed or thought possible. But upon seeing and hearing those things firsthand, you know that Loftus Hall is still very much alive."
End quote. The group learns from Aidan that a common spotting of an apparition in black is seen and is believed to be the spirit of the dark stranger, who sometimes still to this day believed to be the devil roaming the halls. He goes on to tell them the story of the Tottenhams and their experience with the dark stranger brought in by the storm, telling them that when the man was discovered to have a cloven foot, he burst into a fireball and exited through the ceiling. And with as much effort as possible that is put into it, it is still unable to be repaired to this very day. Then he goes on to tell them that it is thought that Anne and the dark stranger had an ongoing affair, contrary to popular story, and through this affair, there was a child born. as the family would not have been able to handle the disgrace that would come with the child. Anne was locked away in the tapestry room and left alone to deal with the baby on her own. In the late 1870s, when the house was being restored, a young laborer in the tapestry room found skeletal remains in the walls.
Of a baby.
As the investigation begins, the Irish ghost hunters proceeded to set up a base for their investigation in one of the main entry halls. Member Tim Kelly goes on to say that there is a very oppressive feeling while being in the house. He says that being in the home, there is a very unexplainable, strange vibe, and even stating that he's been in many different haunted locations, but there's just something about this one that gives you an eerie feeling. As day gives way to night and darkness sets in, the ghost hunters embark through the main front doorway to start their investigation. Tim decides to start the investigation using the same doorway that the dark stranger was said to have used. He heads in with investigation tools at the ready to document any evidence he can. They immediately start with base readings on the EMF and find it seems to be a 0.3 to 0.4 and sometimes fluctuating to a 0.5. While taking the measurements, Tim starts to take note that there are spikes of EMF going up the servant staircase on the first floor and sees a crucifix etched into the floor, signifying that someone had died there in that very spot. Leaving Tim and Tom on the staircase, member Tina heads to the old chapel and almost immediately records a hotspot on one of the pews. She then calls to Tim to confirm her find. When he arrives, the K2 meter starts to go off upon his entering the room. He calls out to the spirits, telling them they need to document what's going on in this room, asking them that if they could show themselves or do something, anything. They both go on to say that they're not sure if it's the room or not, but they both get an almost immediate sense that something is wrong and are not sure if it's just because it's an old chapel or that they have a visitor. The two notice there are pictures inside the chapel that depict the cross, and each one is defaced in some sort of way. When talking about this, they both detect a presence in the room, and the K2 meter starts to go off again. They start to try to use the K2 meter to communicate with whatever is in the chapel, with them asking if it is the spirit of one of the nuns that used to live there, and the K2 meter lights up, almost immediately answering their question. Member Shay and Tom, investigating the tapestry room, discover something startling, and they call the rest of the team into the room. While using the thermal detector, Shay points out to the rest of the team that while scanning the tapestry room, the chair that is in there has a hot spot that looks as if somebody has been sitting there, even though the room was completely empty and no one but them was in the house. While they are all discussing their find, they watch as the heat signature appears in real time, as if someone is taking a seat right in front of them. The team decides to move forward in the house and go upstairs to further the investigation, which leads them to the game room, where the story of the Dark Stranger took place. The team gathers around the table for an EVP session. They ask,
Can you make a noise in the room? Can you tap on the table? Can you tell us who you are?
Tom starts to look very uncomfortable. Tim asks Tom if he's feeling okay, and looking around the room, Tom says,
It's getting very cold in here.
Feeling the production crew might be contaminating the investigation, they decide to send one team member to the third floor, alone. The team decides Tom will be the one who goes solo to investigate. Immediately upon hitting the second floor landing, Tom starts to hear creaks and cracks all around him. Trying to move forward with his investigation, you can hear the sounds all around him, as if the house is coming alive. And Tom, for some reason, seems to be very confused. He notes as he enters the third-floor landing, the temperature changes so much that the camera lens starts to fog and begins to lose power, flickering off and on. As Tom becomes increasingly uncomfortable, we find him creeping down along the dark hallway on the third floor, and the sounds of footsteps can be heard coming up the stairs behind him. Panicking, he radios the team asking if anyone has come up the stairs. When the team assures him that no one has come up, he comes to the realization he may not be alone. He enters a room with a single chair in the middle of the room and decides to sit, and his camera starts to flicker on and off once again. He starts to talk to himself, saying that maybe he shouldn't have come up here. No, he definitely shouldn't have come up here, and says,
There's definitely something wrong.
After only a few minutes of being alone, he decides he's done and radios the team as he's heading back down. It's at this moment Tom's camera fails completely and goes dark, leaving him alone and vulnerable. Then Tim decides to go up with his equipment to retrieve Tom, and when he finds him, he is standing alone in the dark, staring into the empty room as if in a trance. Tim then leads Tom back downstairs to rejoin the group. Tom seems very confused and disoriented at this point. An EMF reading taken at the top of the house where Tom was standing is the strongest one that they have recorded yet. And it's here that the investigation ends, almost leaving more questions than answers. What happened in that room? Was he really alone? Loftus Hall is shrouded in mystery and dark legends, a place the devil once called home. What really happened that stormy night, and who is still wandering the halls? The previous owner, Shane and Aiden, quickly purchased Loftus Hall for $800,000 in 2011. Though the mansion retains a solid foundation, the previous owners decided to give it a thorough renovation. But no number of renovations has removed the property's ominous character known to the locals. With so many dark legends on their hands, the Quigleys opted to use the legend to their advantage. From offering haunted tours throughout the property to overnight programs allowing people to experience the mysterious and eerie residence for themselves, they've put the legend to a lucrative use. Despite all the recent renovations, the 27,124 square foot property is in dire need of further renovation, which will cost a massive untold sums. This is precisely why the Quigleys opted to sell Loftus Hall in 2020. But even after it's sold, it's likely the Quigleys won't be able to shake the eerie feeling described by many who stepped foot inside its looming walls. As Aiden Quigley used to say, there's always a feeling that you're not alone in Loftus Hall. Ooh, spooky stories.
Some good stuff.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I did a lot of research, and I cannot find who bought this place.
Maybe it'll pop up one day. Maybe they're just trying to get the renovations done first before making it public, I guess.
I remember one of the last people that were invited to go there to investigate before it sold. I remember that video or show. I can't remember what it was, but it was specifically said that the new owners were not looking to keeping the doors open to letting people in.
It's kind of sad,
It
honestly.
is. It's kind of like what was going on with Waverly Hills there for a little while.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even know if that's over yet. We should probably check on that. So if that's still up, make sure you donate to the Waverly Hills cause.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it is a shame because, you know, this is like a bucket list kind of place. There's not a lot of hauntings that boast of the devil himself being a part of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so out there to think that such a mythical creature like the devil would I don't know. It just depends on how you feel about religion in general, but that's a bold claim.
It is. And I think with it tying into last week, the Hellfire Caves, but then, a Loftus family member being tied to it.
Yes,
and
through one of the other Hellfire Clubs. That's pretty crazy.
What?
Which is why I wanted to make sure that we did Loftus Hall in tandem with doing the Hellfire Caves, because I had already heard that story and I knew it would tie it together.
Mm-hmm.
But more so the fact that it was almost like he was the president of a club, but this is where he chose to stay.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was a cool little tie together to wrap up the first half of our spooky month stuff. So,
I have enjoyed this very, very much.
oh, yeah. It's been a lot, but it's been a lot of fun too, and it's a very cool story. So I have a feeling the whole holiday season in general is going to bring us some pretty cool stories. People only think of Halloween time as the spooky time, but it's really fall and winter.
Oh, yeah.
So as we go into these darker, colder months for some, I think we're going to be trying to drudge up some of the more spooky stuff.
The more dark stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The creepier stuff.
Oh, yeah. We've got a few ideas coming down the pipeline, so it'll be good stuff.
Settle in with a hot apple cider or a hot chocolate.
Or beer, however you like to roll.
Or that. And just enjoy the spooky times.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So, now that we've talked about it all, there's only one thing left to do.
Is it real?
Well, Other Steven, that's a question that we need to ask Megan. So, Megan, what do you think about Loftus Hall?
I have always thought of Ireland as this mythical, mysterious land. And I think to have multiple places and areas kind of tie all in together that lead with the devil and with so much paranormal activity that has been recorded there and a lot of the same experiences, I absolutely think this place is real.
Absolutely.
Abso-freaking-lutely. So what about you?
I too agree. I don't know. I'm not, for anybody listening, I'm not a religious man. So it would be not thought of to be impossible for me to think that the devil could have been there. I mean, I could be wrong about everything. I don't know. I want it to be true because, man, what a rad story.
Yeah, right?
I don't know if I believe it so much in the biblical sense that it's haunted, but I try to go back like I normally do and look at, like, how many people died here fighting for this place?
Mm-hmm.
Back then and even before then. And then leading up to that, there's some stuff that was left out. There were people who died in this house along the way. The part of your story where the IGH guys and girls, sorry, people, they found the cross etched in the floor, and it was to distinguish the fact that someone had died in that spot, and that wasn't the only spot in the house. There were other ones.
Wow.
So I truly do believe that the fear brought on by people coming in here, dying in here, and then just all balled together, I really do think something's happening there.
Absolutely.
And I really find it super strange, spooky, and ominous and weird that somebody bought it knowing what it was and isn't telling anybody anything.
Ooh.
What's going on there?
Yeah.
Are they like going to try to summon some stuff there?
Oh God, I hope
Think
not.
about the lineage of that place, the history of it. Who would buy that and think, we're going to fix it up and live here and it's going to be our beautiful new home?
Yeah.
No, nobody.
No.
Nobody.
No one.
No, it's got too much history. You might be able to go into it not thinking anything scary, but the locals will never let you forget.
Right. Oh,
So,
absolutely.
They better not tear it down. So, yes. So this week, we're going to have to give this one
The big old seal of approval.
And that's the double header of the devil. What a great way to kick off Halloween season.
Hellfire Caves and Loftus Hall.
Yes, but we're going to end on Halloween with something that I don't think anybody's going to see coming. So it is going to be way different than what you're expecting out there, trust me. and it's going to have a guest co-host. Well, he's not going to be on the show, unfortunately, and we tried to line it up, but he's going to be a huge part of the show. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a great episode. It's going to be very different from what you think you're going to hear. It's going to be all the spooky, supernatural, and maybe some odd stuff in there too. So
I am super excited.
Make sure you tune in on Halloween while you're walking your kids around and while they're having fun trick-or-treating. You can listen to the show and hear what we're going to say. So I think this is where we're going to end it. This is a pretty good one. I'm pretty happy with this.
I thoroughly enjoyed this one. This was good.
I have to go edit now. So where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at forthebooze.
You can also find us on Twitter at forthebooze. And if you'd like to listen to us on your television or on your phone, but maybe see a little screen, you can check us out on YouTube at For the Booze. And don't forget, send in your spooky stories and your location suggestions, or just to say hi over at forthebooze12@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Anything you have to say, it'd be great. And I think they're supposed to do something else, right?
I think so. 5 stars, rate and review.
That's what I'm talking
about. It helps out the
about.
show a lot. We really appreciate it. And we also really appreciate every one of you listening.
That's right. Hey, we take 16 hours a week to make the show. Hook us up with 2 minutes of your time. Give us 5 stars.
We really do appreciate everyone listening. It makes what we do, we already enjoy it so very much. And to know that so many of you listen and enjoy it as well, it means a lot to us.
Who would have known? We are like 40-something episodes in already.
I know.
It
doesn't feel like it.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. I looked when I uploaded the last episode, and I was like, wow, we've really come a long way.
That's 40 date nights, babe.
It is. So, hey, if you're listening to the show and you kind of like started in here at the newer stuff, do not go back and listen to the first few episodes.
Yeah, it was a little rough in the beginning, so sorry about that.
It's come a long way. Or you can go back and make fun of us. We're fine with that, too.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I guess that's where we're going to leave you. And just remember, Halloween, make sure you show up because we're going to have a real good one coming up. So I guess that's it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next
Catch you
time.
on the flip side.
Bye.